Well, hello there. Happy Friday. It's been a bit of a rough Friday in New York City. We've had the deluge this morning. I took a little video, and at one point the water, where I'm on the second floor looking down at the street, and you couldn't see the sidewalk or even this little bit of lawn. We have frontage in front of our building. It was all underwater, and the water was actually up to probably almost to the top of the wheel well of this car parked in front of us. My wife says that she saw it starting to move. Probably not a good sign. There was someone had put a mattress out on the street for trash pickup, and the mattress was floating down the street. But thankfully didn't get, that was kind of literally and figuratively the high watermark of the flooding. And it's been continually raining all day, but I guess it really was a flash flood, because in 10 minutes it was gone. Even kind of as we're watching it, I wish I would have had the wherewithal to do a time lapse, put my phone up and just have it clip, because it was pretty neat. It was just so up there, and then and it was going down, and then you just didn't pay attention to a minute, and then it was kind of just back to being just a normal, really rainy day, but not, get to the ark kind of day. I'm here using the D&D blogs. I'm going to try this one today, see how this works. I just haven't found. Actually, that's not true. I think I've been finding that a lot of the regular sources of blogging material just hasn't been putting out stuff. And I don't mean to sound, not trying to be snobby or somehow suggest that it's beneath me. I just haven't found a lot of stuff that was super interesting in the blogosphere of late. That the blogosphere that I guess I'm following. I need some new blood. I think in terms of topics, not that people have been posting stuff, just the topics I haven't found particularly got to talk about this worthy, just in the terms of the titles. And then nobody sent me anything amazing. Ian says, glad I didn't float away. Yes, me too. Getting my daughter to school was a bit dicey. My wife ended up driving out there and then kind of second guessed dropping her off at the school, but it turned out okay. Though her after school today was canceled, so I actually had to run and pick her up, which is part of why the stream is so late today, or on time if you prefer the streams in the afternoon. Let's see what we've got here. We've got N-World, I don't know, D&D 5e feats, no thank you. Planescape character options, don't care. Warlock returns number 10. I think this is the other thing, and look, I'm all for marketing, and I get it, because we all creators of different stripes have to market, but I've also found that some of the blogs, it's a lot about like, hey, this is coming out, hey, it's in the Kickstarter, hey, we've unlocked a stretch goal, and great, happy, and yeah, I know you need to do it, but I don't really want to read. I'm not really interested in reading it. And I felt like a lot of stuff has been kind of advertising heavy, at least that I've seen. I don't mean to paint everybody with a broad brush. Okay, what is glory worth? Oh, let's see. That's from the Bastionland Presser. So this is my problem. Maybe this one. Okay, the Adventure Point Crawl campaign. Here we go. And let me know if you are in here and you're seeing something and you're thinking, that is something that is interesting and that we should look at. I'm happy to. This one we're looking at right now is posted to sorcererskull.blogspot.com. And let me just give another reminder. Get off of Blogspot, please. Do yourself a favor. Do the world a favor. I just saw that it ended up in my spam, but Google is sunsetting their Jamboard, which people love, that people were using as one of those tools. Oh, you know what I do? I use Discord, and I use Jamboard, and I use stuff. Well, Jamboard's going away. And they've been saying, hey, we're going to integrate with these paid-for services. Oh, that's wonderful if you have those paid-for services. But if you don't, then, Jamboard's just going away. Bye-bye, Jamboard. And they have done so little with Blogspot over the years. I don't know if there's somebody that just over there that just loves it, what their thinking is. But to me, you just can't. If you're building your platform on one of these free Google tools, you can't trust it. Cannot trust it. At least something like WordPress as a free tool, or some of the other tools that are free. That's kind of their bread and butter. That's what they do. But Blogspot's not their moneymaker. And maybe they feel like it has value because it feeds into search and maybe AI and other stuff. Now, I don't know. And yeah, by the way, like in terms of AI and stuff, do you know if your stuff that you post on blog, I mean, not that anything is really safe because if it's publicly indexable, they can grab it. But I mean, with all this stuff going on, do you know what you've signed away in terms of using your data from Blogspot, whatever it may be? Let's get off it. Ian asks if I'm subscribed to Ben Milton's Gladysent. I am not. Maybe I should be, but I'm not. And I was a little bit bummed out because one time he actually threw a mention to the channel on the Gladysent, and yeah, it did not affect my viewership or numbers in any way, really, which was a little bit of a bummer. But hey, appreciate the shout out nonetheless. Keep the shout outs coming, even if they don't have any short or long term effect on me. Maybe for the best. Okay, this is called the Adventure Point Crawl Campaign. So I don't know if they mean to be a point crawl or that it's Adventure Point, but it's Adventure -Point. Like Adventure Point is the thing. Crawl Campaign from sorcererskull.blogspot.com. They have a map here. I just want to look at it. So, okay, so this is obviously has to do with looking at how Avatar did things. And so we have a bunch of these. It took the map of the Avatar universe or the world, I guess, and they plotted some arrows in there. Okay, let's read it. My kid has been rewatching Avatar: The Last Airbender, which means I have been rewatching it, and that gave me a role-playing game-related idea. Not so much in regard to its content, but really its structure. The creation of the fantasy epic, such a staple of fantasy media, has always been hard in games because historically, attempts to do so have led to drastically limited options for player agency. At best, the adventure path that is the modern descendant of the Dragonlance modules tends to be really linear. At its worst, it's an outright railroad. I don't think it has to be that way, though, but it would require some discussion and buy-in from players and a good session zero. Here's how I think it could work. First, the GM tells the players the campaign setting and the situation and suggests, but not mandates, a quest, capital Q, perhaps. Or perhaps the players and the GM sort of make that up together. The quest is the desired outcome. Defeat the Fire Lord in the case of The Last Airbender, or defeat Sauron in The Lord of the Rings. The players make up characters, finalize the quest, capital Q, and plan the steps they think they will need to achieve it. The quest needn't be etched in stone. It's possible the campaign, as it unfolds, might lead to a different goal. E.g., Babylon 5 was our last best hope for peace. It failed, but in the year of the Shadow War, it became something greater, our last best hope for victory. It's even conceivable PCs might switch sides. Anyway, there should also be more character-specific goals woven in, not just big campaign ones. The GM plots those steps both geographically on a point crawl map and node-wise for a campaign structure map, and makes clocks of antagonist or rival actions and other events. It's important to note here that the steps which will become nodes aren't plotted scenes. They are linked to each other in a linearly or strictly linear fashion for the most part, and they aren't supposed to go a certain way. Nothing is supposed to happen. In Avatar, Aang has to master the 4 elements. That goal could have played out in a lot of different ways. In fact, it takes 2 potential teachers before he ultimately gets to learn firebending. Localizing potential places where the goals can be achieved is important because fantasy epics tend to cover a lot of geography. They aren't just dramas or soap operas to be played out in a limited location. Fourth, the players choose where to go and have other adventures and encounters along the way due to those choices. This may call for a bit of separation of player and character knowledge, but even without that, I feel like it works if the players just know the likely location of achieving one of their goals. Circumstances may mean it doesn't work out. The world doesn't stay static, but any unsuccessful attempt to achieve a goal at a point should always yield clues to a goal, either another one or the one they failed to achieve. In this sense, it's like running a mystery. Clues to the next goal location shouldn't be hard to find. Fifth, players can alter goals in response to events or their desires. New point crawl maps may need to be generated in response. When new goal nodes come online, new hooks and areas of interest need to be populated around them. It's the story, quote unquote, goals embedded in sandboxy locations that makes this much less linear than an adventure path. Sixth, repeat until the PCs achieve the goal or the clocks expire and a new status quo and possibly campaign is established. What if the hobbits fail to destroy the ring before Sauron's victory? Well, the story needn't be over. This approach doesn't feature the degree of session-to-session freedom of the complete sandbox game, it's true. However, the player collaboration in the planning phase ensures it's not a GM-enforced story. Indeed, both players and GMs will be surprised by the final shape of the emergent story. While this may be a bit of a novel approach, at least I haven't seen anyone ever talk about it, ideas about quote-unquote node-based scenario design and quote-unquote mission-based adventures have existed for a long time. What this does to enhance those is get player input prior to the missions and links the nodes in a grander campaign. So I think it's an interesting idea. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. I think that there's a couple of things, right? So I don't think you need to plot out the point crawl bit up front. I think, and I would say that the players, I think agreeing on the quest, whether it's the nature of it or the thing itself, right, is fine. And then usually what happens is, for example, right, in Lord of the Rings, they're starting off in the Shire. They can't just, well, they I suppose they could just go to Mount Doom straight from the Shire. Just, all right, hobbits go. But they need things, right? They need help. They need a few things, right? They need to say, if we're looking at Lord of the Rings, basically at the start, they need to ditch the Nazgul. They need to find allies. So that's, Gandalf. They need guidance as to where to go. They need routes. So they need a bunch of things. And so as the players are playing through the story, or as that, say, session 0, when you're playing the quest, you have this ultimate goal, which is Mount Doom. And then you have these sub goals that you need to do. Well, right now, our effort is we need to get out of the Shire without the Nazgul following us, because that would make everything impossible. Okay, we also need to find allies. Okay, we also might need, ultimately they do require some items to do what they need. The file of Gladriel is a big one that helps them out, but they need, they just need things, right? They need to potentially get the mithril vest, or the mithril vest or shirt or whatever it is from Bilbo, who he took with him. So you can come up with those sub goals, and then you can figure out where those sub goals, what you kind of need to do. So they have letters. Gandalf says, meet me in Bree. Okay, so they need to go to Bree. Oh, we know that Bilbo went, we're not sure where Bilbo went, but he went towards the Lonely Mountain. I think that was his stated goal. Okay, well, we kind of know how to get there. Great. We know, various things. And so then as you are discussing or doing it in game or out of game, this first sub goal you need to reach, you could put that line on the map saying, okay, we need to get from Hobbiton or wherever to Bree. Okay. And then there's our thing. Like, I don't think you need to lay it out all in advance and have linked together from jump the kind of sort of mystery quest nodes and nodes of the point crawl part or hex crawl, however you're going to do it. But you can, at some point you link them together. Other than that, I think it's a fine thing. I guess it's just restating, like a lot of things are, right? Which is, I'm sure I do the same thing, kind of restating something that's like, yeah, that's kind of a no-brainer, but just doing it a different way and looking at the way different bits of fiction work. And look at I am passingly familiar with Avatar: The Last Airbender. I did watch some of it. My daughter and I, we didn't finish it. I should probably go back and finish it because it was fairly good. But it's like a lot of things we take these ideas and look it up. So it's just another way of kind of looking at kind of what I was talking about in the other stream about trying to layer on sort of narratives kind of thing. This is different, right? It's like, we're going to have this big quest, but we want to have the kind of sandboxy stuff. How can we put it together? I do think it's a nice idea to get your party to kind of buy in on the quest or come up with the quest themselves, at least in basic, if not on all the specifics, obviously. But that was from the Sorcerer's Skull. Thanks for sharing. Back to the daily blog posts. Okay, so that was that. Untested pigeon. I don't know. Things still to resolve in Fell Tower. I don't know. All right, let's go backwards. Okay, that's still there. Preview Planescape. I don't care. Medusa and Gorgons. Let's try this one. This is posted also on Blogspot. nightattheopera.blogspot.com from Wednesday. Sorry, wrong window. Medusa and Gorgons. But hey, R-dubs. At the Night at the Opera blog on Blogspot, this one's called Medusa and Gorgons. Long ago in ages past, I warned you there'd be more art posts. Today you get to see my collection of artwork. Oh, I don't know. Okay, so this is about Medusas. I'm trying to see if there's anything really gameable. It's nice to get that's a nice piece of artwork, and this is a nice Medusa, but is there anything besides pictures? All right, so maybe there's, let's see. Hey, RPG Grandma. RPG Grandma says, what's up? Lunchtime, folks. RPG Grandma's been nothing but emergencies here today. Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel that way a little myself. In a small scale, RPG Grandma, we've been dealing with the flooding in our kind of neighborhood. I'm trying to see if there's anything in here that's really cool. I'll read through let's go back to the history part. Oh, let's see. It seems like more about the artwork. All right, I'm going to skip this one. It seems cool. Is there anything that's more kind of gamey than artsy? But it is good illustrations. I like that one. I've used that one before, or something similar. That's a cool one. All right, good, but not what I'm looking for. Stuck in the astral plane. Oh, yeah, I don't know. Oh, let's see. D100. No. Spare parts. Level with me. Ugh. Oh, come on. Really? All right. Reviews. No, thank you. Let's make a crafting system. All right. Despite my my lack of enthusiasm for craft systems in general, let's give this one a look. All right. I don't know how so this is okay. First of all, this is posted to dumpstatadventures.com /the-gm-is-right/let's-make-a-crafting-system. RPG Grandma says flooding is no fun. Yes, that's true. I don't know if this is for what I say this. I don't know what version of D&D this is for. It feels like I'm feeling it's going to be 5th edition, but I don't know. We'll give it a read. They haven't said yet. So this is called Let's Make a Crafting System. Last time we talked about magic items. We talked about the mechanical problems. Okay, so let's just get on to it. Crafting magic items. We want to craft magic items, and here are the problems I'm thinking of going into this. First bullet. We need some sort of gate to keep just anyone from crafting anything they want. If we want magic items to feel special or rare, this gate might be even more restrictive. You'll see. And I think the solution for this one is making a feat that you have to have in order to craft items, unless you have a proficiency in a specific tool, like scroll scriber's supplies, alchemist supplies, or something else, in which case you can only craft those specific things that are associated with your tool, since, specific beats general. All right, so the first thing is I'm guessing 5th edition because they're mentioning feats, though I suppose it could be Pathfinder. We'll have to keep reading forward. I'm not really familiar with this site, so I don't know where they lean. Second bullet. Need a limit on what items you can craft, so while you might be a first level adventurer, you could have 1,000,000 gold pieces. This shouldn't mean you can just make whatever you want, as your power is still quite minute. I think this can also let us incorporate proficiency bonus into this system. Third bullet. Crafting requires a cost. This could be a gold cost, or maybe you find a specific item you need. I think what we could do to try and appease everyone, with which will all but guarantee everyone hates it, is that we provide both things: a cost that a player can just pay if they don't want to think about it, and ingredients, so maybe they can quest for specific ingredients, get ingredients as rewards for questing, and allow the GM to ignore gold costs if they so wish. In addition, for the gold cost, it'll be based on what I've made in the pricing magic items series, so you have to adjust gold costs if you don't like my numbers. Okay, so that's fine, I guess. What was that? So that's the third. So fourth bullet, DC to make our checks against. Crafting has its ups and downs. I think it's nice to force players to roll those shiny dice they spend way too much money on. Fifth bullet, a time commitment, so you just can't keep churning magic items out just because your dice bought only have 20 on their side, 20s on their sides. Sixth bullet, in order for the crafter to actually know how to craft an item, they need to know how it is designed and how to build it themselves. This means they need a recipe or formulae to follow to build the item. They can either take one item, break it down, thus destroying it in order to learn its construction. This would be mostly handy for consumables, less so flame tongues, since your barbarian might still be using it, or finding its recipe out in the wild, either in the hands of a crafter as treasure or a wizard in a lonely tower who is quite tired of having visitors. Another bullet, we need another small gate to keep out any riffraff from simply picking up this feat and doing whatever they want, like crafting Holy Avengers or belts of giant strength just because they can. Made items will require you have to have access to certain levels of spells, be a cleric, etc. to craft them. These will be prerequisites and are passive guards at the gates to crafting. And then last bullet, lastly, we need something for the players to interact with. This will be specific requirements in excess of the ingredients that the players will have to provide. These simply can't be bypassed by going on an adventure, but are something so specific to the magic item, you'll need to get this item. Not every magic item is going to need a specific item, but it might require spell slots or something else active. These will be a requirement and requires the player to actively interact with it instead of just rolling a crafting check and taking away gold pieces. Okay, well, I think I'm pretty fine with, in general, what they're looking for. It's not an OSRE kind of system, and I'm not as I don't want to say I'm not as interested, but I think in terms of 5th edition, it's good. I think the gold cost versus ingredients, I would definitely be one of the people who wants to lean towards the specific ingredients because it just adds more to the table. I think those things are, I mean, I can see from a player perspective, maybe a GM perspective too, like this is no fun, but I think when I think about that sort of the adventuring loop, especially in your more sandboxy campaigns, it is so much there, especially, especially the more sandboxy you get, the more open world you get, is that you really are relying on players having their own kind of self-actualizing. A player and their character saying, I want to do this, or we collectively as a group decided we want to do this, and now we're going to go out and do it. And requiring specific items or ingredients to craft items, if your players are interested in crafting items, that just feeds into that adventure loop. Oh, we need the wings of a juvenile red dragon. Now that's something we have to go find. And all the steps of tracking down wherever a juvenile red dragon is becomes an adventure, and bits of adventure could become a whole campaign depending on what the thing is. So that I want to loop in. Now, in 5th edition, oftentimes people lament the fact that there's really not much to spend gold on. So I suppose the gold cost comes in handy for, hey, what are you going to do with all that gold? And even in OSR games, there's that, depending on the type of game you run, you can also have that issue of they have all this oodles of gold, nothing to spend it on. Well, in that case, I guess it does become something you can spend it on. RPG Grandma says, oh, just do what Arduin does, levels for crafting, and gets it through the players' heads. They have limited extra skills outside the profession. Yeah, I mean, yes, that's one of my criticisms often of crafting systems, is that they just kind of bolt on, and, there isn't really a lot of skill or anything. Not skill's not the right word. You can just kind of bolt it onto whatever you are. And it's also like, I'm just going to do it in the 5 minutes before I go to sleep every night. And that's good for some things. People talk about, oh, I can make a staff in 10 minutes. Like, okay, I guess, but that's just a staff. So go ahead and go out there and make all the staves that you want. But in terms of making special items or items that are really going to last the test of time, definitely if they're magical, to me requires like mastery. And I don't know how you can get that kind of mastery with a capital M if you're adventuring all the time. You dedicate your life to being a master crafter. RW says the finding is the adventure and the time required is the final resource spent. Yep, it could be not a bad thing. Ian says they had a new 5e player ask once, well, what is all this gold even for? And I really didn't have a great answer. Yeah, I mean, that can definitely happen. That's why I always feel like getting players in the mindset of at least looking, either building domains from kind of jump, or at least getting in the mindsets of it are good. And there are those sinks you can add in. RPG Grandma mentions guilds, and guilds can have dues that you have to pay. There's rents. There's, there's taxes. There's, you want to give gifts. People are just going to ask you stuff. Oftentimes I imagine in a society that has any kind of adventuring or treasure hunting, that anytime any of the local lords get a whiff that you're finding stuff in some grave somewhere, they're going to all put their hand out for a piece. Now that's not a lot of fun, because it's basically, they're spending the gold, but not in a fun way. They're just getting taxed, but it is something. And then I think in terms of like, well, how can we make it that it's not just me acting like the fantasy IRS and just coming to get them for 30%, is really establish kind of domains and homesteads and those sorts of things early on, at least if they want to. Now, if they don't want to, your options are a little bit more limited, but there's, carousing tables, and there's just kind of living it up socially and throwing parties, and lots of ways you can put things that they may want give some kind of gold cost. You want to get an audience with the Duke. You gotta impress the Duke somehow. And how do you impress the Duke somehow? Sure, you can do something amazing. That always will help, but also throwing a party. Right? I've mentioned this before in some other stream, whatever, but the Count of Monte Cristo is a great example. Guy shows up, he's got oodles of money, but he can't get the time of day with anybody. So what does he do? He has to put on a whole show. He has to show off the grandeur, and that costs money. RPG Grandma says, players are cheap. The trouble they can get in avoiding road tolls. Yes. Road tolls, wearing good clothes, staying in decent inns. Okay, so let's get back to crafting magic items. So now we have addressed our problems. Now let's get to the rules. Starting getting to the rules. Okay, so if you wish to craft magic items, you must first become trained in the craft. You must select the craft magic item feat. Sounds very 3rd edition-y. Upon gaining the feat, you automatically learn the recipes for 3 common magic items. If you wish to learn more, you will either have to deconstruct a magic item, see the deconstruct magic items section, oh boy, or find its recipe in the world. Some crafters, enchanters, arcade masters, and more may have a copy of the recipe they are willing to trade, sell, or barter for your adventuring services. Most sellers will sell a copy of the recipe for 10% of the magic item's value, but may require you to take on a quest to provide compensation in a different way. 10% of the value doesn't seem like much for a recipe, because meaning the recipe means you can make as many of them as you want. I almost feel like that's more valuable. What should be cheaper, buying a single, say, 3D print of an item, or buying the file? I guess in like those kind of things, right? The file is cheaper than the actual 3D printed thing. But for things that are rare, I would think maybe it's 110% or something bigger, because you're giving away the secret to making it. I had something else to say about this, and now I don't think. Oh, what I was going to say is one thing that I will say about this, right? Something that might be interesting is you're going to have recipes, formula, whatever you want to formulae for the plural, whatever you want to call them. And these are things that you can add to your your magic, your treasure generators. You've got treasures. The party's finding hoards. Well, they find scrolls, right? Oh, so you can find a spell scroll in there. Well, you could also find a recipe or a formula. Might be another thing to kind of throw in there. So if you're going to use this kind of system, something to think about is how you can add those into your sort of treasure tables. Ian says, player, quote, I buy the whole bar drinks for the night. Same player, quote, what do you mean it's 2 gold to cross this bridge? I stab him. Yes. Well, it's all, look, it happens all. I mean, this is not even, this is life, right? There's your will, how many, we all know somebody who will be willing to spend a ton of money on thing A or, experience A, but then it comes to thing B or experience B, and suddenly they don't want to spend any money at all on it. They just don't value it, right? We all value things differently. R-Dub says, let's look at the 1E DMG for this magic item crafting. Is there, I don't think I have my, wait a minute. Do I have my 1E DMG? Hold on a minute. I actually might. I got to go look under the table where I had a couple of books stashed, and I'm looking down there. Is this the 1E DMG? It is. Did they have crafting here? I mean, it makes sense. They got everything else in the kitchen sink in here. And someone may be saying, well, Todd, you're supposed to be an OSR guy and you don't know what's in the 1E DMG. I lose track of what's in here all the time. I also confuse which book is in which what. Is there something in here? So we've got, what do we got here? Because it would be a good kind of interesting point of comparison. We have using magic. We have magical research. Oh, yeah, we do. Fabrication of, all right. Let's go to page 116. Now, there's something. R-dubs. There is something. Page 116 of your 1E DMGs, if you got them handy, which I just as luck would have it, I do. Oh, let's see. That's spell research. Okay. All right. So this is what it'd be cool if we could kind of read them in tandem. Excuse me. All right. So Gygax and Company under page 116, under fabrication of magic items, including potions and scrolls, It is an obvious premise of the game that magic items are made somewhere by someone or something. A properly run campaign will be relatively stringent with respect to the number of available magic items, so your players will sooner or later express a desire to manufacture their own. Obviously, Gygax was not yet aware of the world of Monty Hall campaigns when he wrote this. Do not tell them how this is to be accomplished. In order to find out, they must consult with a sage or a higher level character of the proper profession, the latter being detailed a bit hereafter. So here Gygax is saying, all right, if you're going to, it's clear that magic items come from somewhere, and you gotta go and seek them out because there's not going to be that many. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Don't look further down the DM line, the line of books where we're going to start throwing out tons of magic items, and of course, pay no attention to those Monty Hall campaigns that you may have been reading about in Dragon or elsewhere, where people are all kitted out in every concealable magic item and are slaying gods. So that's what he was saying. So let's see what Dumpstat says is, once you have the recipe for the magic item you wish to construct, you might either spend the gold in the city to gather the required ingredients or find the listed ingredients on your adventures. If you find listed ingredients, you do not have to pay the gold cost. If you find only a few of the listed ingredients, the GM determines how much of the gold cost you must pay, typically at a prorated amount. Ordinarily, only cities or large towns will have all the required ingredients you need up to the GM's discretion. Once you have the required materials, you must meet any prerequisites the item has and fulfill any requirements. If any item lists a requirement as a or prerequisite, this must be fulfilled every day you are working on the magic item. If your item requires you expending a third level slot, you must expend that spell slot every day that you're working on the item. Oh, and this is lukewarm tea for the working man. You must expend that spell slot every day that you work on the item or have someone who can expend that spell slot. Typically, for using another creature to fulfill requirements or prerequisites on creating a magic item, they must spend 1d4 hours for every requirement they are assisting with every day, max of 8 hours a day, or they must be there all day if they are fulfilling a prerequisite. Whew, okay. If a creature assists you, known as an assistant, you treat their skills, spells, and abilities as if they were your own. You cannot use their proficiency in the Arcana skill at the end of crafting the magic item to attempt the check, but must make the check yourself. If you must hire an assistant, they typically charge 2 gold per day for being proficient in a specific skill. Not very expensive, all things considered. If you need an assistant with access to spell casting, their service costs more per the GM's discretion. Typically, per day, 50 gold piece per level of spell. At 4th level spells or higher, it becomes 100 gold pieces per level. And at 7th level spells or higher, it becomes 500 gold piece per level of spell. So this is saying at 7th level, you're not charging 500 gold pieces. It seems like you're charging more like 3,500 gold pieces for a day. For example, if you're crafting an item that requires an 8th level spell to be cast on it, it will cost you 4,000 gold pieces per day to have their assistance. Yep, that's just what I thought. Once you're ready to craft your item, you can begin work, and it takes 8 hours a day for a number of days based on the rarity of the magic item. Once you have finished the required time, you must make an intelligence arcana check against the DC of the magic item. On a success, you build the item. On a failure, you fail to build the item, and you lose a quarter of the ingredients to build the item and must find more. If you roll 5 or more below the DC, you instead lose half the ingredients. You then must spend 1 more day of work and reattempt the check. Whew. Okay. Let's see. Brian Smith has entered the chat. What has he said that I've missed? Brian Smith says, Gygax just wants adventures to support local small businesses. Yep, for sure. Hey, Frederick, welcome aboard. And RPG Grandma says, yep, they need to support their local village. And RPG Grandma says, this is also why one should not kill everyone in the dungeon. The wizard down below might be a crafter extreme, or those goblins might be cool as employees on the big hunting safari. and RW says that they believe in first edition the times for crafting are somewhere near the henchmen info, but could be thinking of men in magic. Oh, not sure. Well, let's see. So there were the rules in brief for the Dumpstat method. Going back to the one first edition DMG, they say, and again, we're on page 116. Magic items are made by high-level magic users, except those items which are restricted to clerics and special racial items in books, artifacts, and relics. Books, including tomes, librams, and manuals, artifacts, and relics are of ancient manufacture, possibly from superior human or demi-human technology, perhaps of divine origin. Thus, books, artifacts, and relics cannot be made by players and come only from the dungeon master. Dwarven and elven manufactured items, the +3 dwarven warhammer, certain other magic axes and hammers, cloaks and boots of elven kind, magic arrows, magic bows in some cases, and even some magic daggers and swords are likewise beyond the ken of player characters of these races. Only very old, very intelligent, and wise dwarves and elves who have attained maximum level advancement are able to properly forge, fashion, or make these items, and have the appropriate magics and spells to change them into special items, i.e., these items are likewise the precinct of the DM exclusively. So basically, he's made some exceptions, right? You can craft everything except for Europa. Don't craft. You cannot craft these things. Brian Smith says, "Beyond the ken" is such a funny phrase. Yeah, but I like it. It's got some good flavor. Gygax continues, "It still leaves an incredible range of magic items which player characters can aspire to manufacture. It is a sad fact, however, that these aspirations must be unsatisfied until the player character achieves a level of ability which is one greater than nominal highest level. So you need to be a high priest, druid, wizard, illusionist. That is, a player character must be at least 11th level high priest, an archdruid, a 12th level wizard, or an 11th level illusionist in order to manufacture magic items, except with respect to potions and scrolls, as will be discussed hereafter. Furthermore, a player character may manufacture only those items particular to his or her profession, or items which are usable by professions not able to so make magic items only." I think that's a complicated way of saying it's got to be kind of a class item or an item for someone for a class who can't make items. So I guess anybody then could make fightery stuff, presumably because fighters can't, in this system, cannot do it themselves. Thus, a cleric is unable to fashion a wand usable by magic users or illusionists. A magic user cannot manufacture a clerical magic item, etc. There is a further prohibition upon clerics regarding the making of items which are prohibited to their profession or which are of the opposite alignment. This restraint does not extend into the sphere of magic users as a class. Thus, clerics cannot manufacture magic swords, but magic users can. Okay. So we got a lot there. And then he goes into potions and a little bit about poison and scrolls. Let's see. Is there anything about items? Oh, boy. Oh, let's see. I'm going to skip fabrication of magic items by illusionists. Fabrication of magic items by charmed or enslaved magic users. Okay, well, I guess we just got to the basic one. All of the various other magic items require the use of the magic, spell, enchanted item, save clerical items. Okay, so because I skipped over scrolls and that scrolls and what was the other one? Scrolls and potions. Let's see. You must determine which spells and ingredients are necessary to the manufacture of each specific magic item. For example, player character wizard of 15th level desires to make a ring of spell storing. He or she commissions a platinum smith. There's a word you don't hear every day, platinum smith, to fashion a ring of the finest quality and pays 5,000 gold pieces for materials and labor. He or she then casts the enchant an item spell according to the player's handbook instructions. All right. As DM, you now inform him or her that in order to contain and accept the spells he or she desires to store in the device, a scroll bearing the desired spells must be scribed, then a permanency spell cast upon the scroll. Then the scroll must be merged with the ring by some means, typically a wish spell. As all of that could not be done in time, the ring would have to be prepared with the enchanted item spell again. Of course, you could tell the player before, if you are soft-hearted, or he or she is intelligent enough to ask before starting the ball rolling. A little cruelty there in the Gygax. Have them go through the process and then tell them, oh, by the way, that's actually not going to work. Start over. So I guess the lesson there from Gygax is, as a player, do all the research of what you need to do first before you start commissioning rings. Let's see. So to make a spell of spell storing, I guess the idea here is your ring of spell storing isn't just generic. It can store any spells. It seems to me that you have to pick the spells you can store in them, right? Because you're then scribing. Because you would do is you order, contain, and accept the spell you desire to store in the device. So you'd have to pick ahead of time the spells you're going to store in the ring of spell storing, which may be how those rings work. I forget. So you need to have, so basically what you need to have is the gold, which is actually by far the easiest part. It doesn't look like you need to, so there's no, so here it seems like the key in the first edition method, there's no outlandish ingredients, but you obviously need to spend money to make a worthy item. Because he spent 5,000 gold on a platinum ring, which I think seemed like a lot. But fine. But then you have to have this other stuff. You have to have a wish spell or something else, but presumably a wish spell seems to be, because as he says typically, a wish spell. In this case, you needed the permanency spell, and then you need to know the spells you need in advance you wanted to store, and then have those cast on scrolls. Oops. Oh, I think my computer went to sleep. No, I'm not trying to log into Sequence or Squarespace. Why would I be trying to log into Squarespace, pal? Okay. Get out of here. All right. Let's see. RPG Grandma says they like the Book of Artifacts that says the soul of something intelligent enough is put in the item for the spell to store properly. Yeah, I've seen stuff like that. It's pretty cool. I will admit. So yeah, I mean, there's some other details here. Okay, so there's a note about this. If we want to go through, I'll just finish off this ring of spell storing example. Let's see. Let me just turn that on. It says that the above mentioned ring of spell storing could be made without the benefit of a permanency spell, and spells could be stored within, but they can only be called forth once, and then the ring would be useless. Wands and other chargeable items do not require permanency, and of course they are used up when all the charges are gone. Items with a permanent duomer, such as weapons, armor, most rings, and miscellaneous magic items, do require a permanency spell to be made continuously operational. So I guess the interesting side note, which never occurred to me, but probably occurred to everyone else, because I never really got in the thing of making lots of scrolls and things like that, because we just would find enough of them. And just I guess we were happy using the arms, the stuff that we had, spells, whatever. I guess that the suggestion here, which would seem good, is that if you cast permanency on a scroll, you could use the scroll over and over again. It would seem like, could you cast permanency on a wand and then have everlasting charges? I don't know. I'd have to read up on the permanency spell again, but I'm 99% sure my player's handbook's not down there, so I don't know if it would do anything. But that's interesting use of the permanency spell for casting. So that's out of the 1E DMG. Back to Dumpstat's 5th edition version, which is a lot more complicated, maybe in a good way, maybe in a bad way, depending. Definitely the 1st edition one, it's a lot simpler, but it lacks some of the gameability, maybe, because once you've got the gold, because you need certain things up front, right? You need to be super high level, which may be good, maybe bad. This means this is very much an end game kind of thing. Or if you're playing in, say, the kind of games the kind of games that are being played when Gygax is writing this are those big club kind of games, right? Oh, we got a bunch of people with a bunch of player characters, and we're rotating people in and out of these groups who are delving into different dungeons or different levels of the same dungeon in this particular open world. So in that kind of instance, it's possible that a player's character reaches a super high level and they don't really go adventuring anymore, but now they can sit back and create some of these spells. There's no particular drain on them. They don't lose levels. They don't have to put any of their essence or anything that they permanently lose into it. They just need to have the gold, and they need to have the spells, and then they need to do something to manufacture the thing you're putting in. And the ring of spell storing didn't require, I guess he said platinum, so you need a platinum smith, but that's probably not a big deal. It's not something outlandish. It's not like you need to craft it out of a dragon's nose hair or something. So okay, go to platinum smith. That's easy enough, done. Right. So it's really just about being of high level. They've really, in terms of Dumpstat, I was talking about all these different little gates to doing crafting. Well, in Gygax's case, it's really just one gate, which is, you're going to have to be 10th, 11th, 12th level, depending. That's about it. After that, you should have all that stuff already. You should probably have wish. You should probably have permanency. You should have these things. And I don't know in 1st edition if there's that same thing with wish where you can only cast it once or something. So presumably you can cast these things a couple times, so you can make your magic items, and then you could probably give them to your other player characters or sell them. I don't know in this kind of situation if there were any economies, magic item economies for these groups where the high level wizard is using their downtime to craft magic stuff for either their lower level fighter or other characters or whatnot, or if they're selling them. I don't know what you would sell it for at that point, but let's see. Looking up at the chat here. RW says, you merge the scroll of the spell storing with the ring via wish. Yep, that seems to be it. So yeah, so it seems like the order of operations is, but I guess it has to do, you have to do these things together in a sense, because he was saying his example of, haha, you got that ring commissioned, but you didn't do these other steps, is you have to have the scrolls made, permanency the scrolls, and then have the scrolls. I guess you have to take it to the forge when they're doing the ring, and at some point during the forging of the ring process, you use wish to merge the scrolls into the ring, and thus you have a ring with whichever spells on there that it can cast over and over again. I mean, I guess you don't have to have multiple scrolls. I guess that's if you wanted different effects, you could purchase. I mean, the interesting thing is, would it be one wish per spell per thing, or would it be, could you get, once you have that ring and you're like, okay, great, I'm going to take 20 scrolls, and then there's obviously a lot of room for abuse or the GM has to fill in the gaps, right? How many spells? Because you could write out the wish, just say, I wish to merge these 20 spell scrolls in front of me into this ring that is also here in front of me, and create from them a ring of spell storing of those spells contained on the scrolls, whatever, like something like that. And if you're not you're not looking to kind of genie wish trick people, okay, fine. So would you allow them 20 with one wish? Is it one wish per one spell scroll? Is it 3? Is it 5? Because there's definitely, if it's just a matter of casting the permanency spell, well, you have so many limited castings per day, but you could also, it doesn't say that you have to be the same magic user. So you could say, hey, everybody, I got 50 spell scrolls. Everybody over the next 2 weeks, everybody every day, memorize permanency and cast it on however many times you can, and cast it on all these scrolls. And by the end of 2 weeks, I'll have 50 spell scrolls with permanency on them. And then I'm going to merge them all into some massive ring of spell storing with 50 spells. I don't know. I presume there'd have to be some kind of limit, but it's kind of vague there. And then RW says, yeah, you need the ingredients for potions and scrolls. Potions, it definitely makes sense. And yeah, the scrolls also make sense. So there is some of that baked in, right? I think the thing is that we have to keep in mind, RWs, is remember in first edition, I mean, in earlier versions of the game, including first edition, there was the ability of finding scrolls out in the wild. So yes, if you're making your own scrolls of everything, you would need to go back to the scroll creation step and say, oh my gosh, I need to go find all the stuff. However, there's a good chance you're at 11th, 12th level. If you haven't burned through all your scrolls on adventures, you're going to have a whole pile of scrolls potentially sitting around that you just never got to using. I mean, that would happen to us all the time just by accident, where you get to the end of a game or a campaign and go, oh yeah, I had this spell of lightning bolt I never cast. Oops, I had five scrolls of fireball that just never came. Like, it just happens, right? So I could see that 11th or 12th level, you could not even need to scribe your own scrolls, unless that was a requirement that you need to scribe your own scrolls. They can't just be anybody's scrolls. Brian Smith accusing me of having a Squarespace sponsorship. I wish, Brian Smith, I would love to say at some point, this stream sponsored by Squarespace, but no sponsorships for me. No Squarespace, no Spindrift, no tea manufacturers. RW says a ruling call, but in 1E first edition, I do not think it says, the opposite. Oh. Brian Smith says definitely a scheme. Oh, I guess you're talking about invulnerability potions need. Oh, I see potion stuff. RPG Grandma also says professional magic scroll scribes are a thing. Well, there you go. All right, so that's first edition, which is interesting. So now back to dump stat. So we have our basic rules laid out. You need a craft magic item feat. You need the recipe to craft the magic item. You need either the gold or the ingredients to make the item, with limits on where you could do your shopping to give more levers for the GM to play with. We go over the prerequisites, how long it takes, requirements, and the basic crafting of the item, which is great and all, but this is only part of the system. We need to talk about gaining recipes, deconstructing a magic item, edge case to help out GMs, base DCs for magic items, restrictions based on your proficiency bonus, and a few other things. All right, I'm actually going to kind of scroll. I don't think we need to get in all. If you need all the details, go to dumpstatadventures.com, because they're going to get in the nitty gritty, which is kind of obviously 5th edition based, presumably because that's what this system is for. Oh, I like this little pie chart there. It's telling me how far I am in the article. And then, you get some feats. This is all good stuff. Actually, R-Dubs, I really appreciate you bringing up the 1E DMG. 'Cause to me, that's by far the more, no offense to dump stat, because I'm just more old school OSR inclined. Being reminded of the 1E DMG version's probably more fun. All right, and that's the end of it. Cool. So there you go. So go here if you want some. I mean, it seems like on the whole pretty decent if you want to get into crafting. Probably the first edition one, I guess it is fine too. I mean, on one hand, I like it because in terms of games, how many people are getting up to 11th, 12th level? Not that many. So that just limits the amount of crafting you're going to have if they have. But if somebody wants to do it, I guess that can be a goal. And just there it is. You have to be a master. I mean, that was kind of what I was talking about before. You got to be a master. And I think their way of gating it is say, yeah, you got to be a master. And there that means you got to be a really high level. I kind of like the idea that the one thing I will say is what I like about the feat is that anybody can, anybody in terms of you don't have to be a magic user, because it just becomes another sort of, this is what magic users can do. That's awesome that fighters kind of can't do. And I think some option, obviously fighters, when they get to high enough level, will have in their retinue, will have magic users, but I don't know if at some point they'll have one of high enough level to do this. So it'd be nice to have an option for, well, hey, if you're a really high level fighter, you could do something else. Maybe there's another way to do it. It's maybe not in terms of scrolls and things, but in terms of armor and arms. Maybe that was where you get into, like, you have to kill something. Go kill this thing. And then dump your sword, dunk your sword in its blood, and something will happen, which would be cool. Brian Smith says the 5th edition has the Artificer too. Yes, they do. But yeah, I'm not a huge, I don't hate it, but I don't love it. It's kind of steampunk stuff. All right, let's see. Do we got anything more? Follower, power casting. I don't know what's power casting. What that means. Okay, we got that already. Let's see. Minecraft times Dungeons & Dragons DLC. No, thank you. Castles and Crowns. Look inside. Yeah, more kind of self promo stuff, which again, I understand, I appreciate, but I'm not interested in reading it at the moment. D12 Shifty Tavern Hustlers. Meet the Halfling Titan. 9 Colors of Fire. This might be kind of fun. All right, let's see. Let me zoom in on this one. Posted to the pasteldungeon.blogspot.com. This is called 9 Colors of Fire. Obviously, 9 colors. First is red-orange. The brilliant embers of a true fire are impossible to mistake. All other flames are corrupted form of this ancient and pure flame. Okay. 2 is blue. Cobalt flame, immensely hot. Smoke from a flame this hot can reveal wayward spirits and bring light to the truth long lost. So this seems like it's pretty cool. So obviously this is different colors of flame that not only have, that have some kind of special effects. So if you could, so like blue, I like a lot. If you can get something really hot, and I don't know what in terms of kind of medieval fantasy stuff, how you get something to get the kind of blue heat. But if you can get that blue heat, then maybe stuff that's invisible, secret doors, like you can think about, wow, this is pretty cool. Or like smoke, the smoke reveals maybe things that are on the ethereal or astral plane. Maybe the light shines will bring, will reveal hidden passages and traps. Like that's some neat stuff. Of course, you got to be able to how do you do that? How do you do that in a consistent way, I suppose? And then you can come up with kind of thinking again about that adventure loop. Well, what do I need to make blue flame? If blue flame will help us in the spot or help us in general, how can I get there? What do I need to get super, super hot that I can take somewhere and then do this? Does it have to be some kind of ritual? Do I have to set up a forge? What do I have to do? Like, that's neat. And then you can play around with I guess what I'm really digging about this is I'm thinking, presumably, this is not something necessarily that you're going, okay, it's a spell. This is something that maybe, depending on, anybody can come up with a way of, like, I could see in the dungeon, you're going like, man, there's something here, we can't find it. We need, and someone going, we need to get a really hot fire. Like, what can we do to make a really hot fire? And that doesn't have to be magic necessarily, though a spell could help. But it's a way of giving something that is mundane kind of a magical twist to it. So that, yeah, you don't have invisibility, but you can make a blue flame and shine it around, then maybe that's just as good. Alcohol equals blue flame. Oh, well, there you go. Every Christmas in my house, blue flame and the fireball. All right. Well, there you go. You got to burn some alcohol, which may cause some people in the party to scream in agony, but might be good for an alternate use for your oil. Or not oil, I guess, but something actual alcohol. Well, I guess it would have to be fairly high proof, right? You can't just burn your ale. That probably wouldn't work. Because now we have azure. The light of the dead star Gnatus, like ever-shifting azure glass, chill to the touch. The star is dim and still, a monument to what was, like a glass eye. Gnatus died before Neurim knew life, yet still it clings to life, animated by the glass flame. It was carried to Neurim by the servants of the bodiless ones known as husks. The azure flame of Gnatus is said to bring life to the inanimate through harvesting the flame, though harvesting the flame is nigh impossible. So maybe you can't make these yourselves. You have to try to find it. There are some really neat options here. I mean, this is obviously very setting dependent. I'm a little bit lost on some of this stuff, but the concept is pretty cool that this azure flame animates dead. If you can find some way of generating it or finding it, and then you both have to either generate it, find it, and then figure out how to stick it in the undead thing. Burgundy, the light of love, passion, and death. Lit ever eternal in the crematory. In Scythia, the east, the burgundy flame, carried by the drowned Scythia, the west, burns eternal in the furnace of the great crematory, where all Scythians are burnt upon their death, their ashes feeding the flame. It is said that their passions color the flame. Such a deep and vibrant red can only be forged by love. So no particular thing, but very culturally influential, though. Just for the record, it's probably not their ashes that feed the flame, but their bodies feed the flame, and the ashes are what's left. Am I being pedantic? Yes. Okay, magenta, the light of illusion. Ooh, a burning fire of falsehood. It's a figment, really. An impossible sight born of an impossible color. All illusions are the shadows of this magenta flame. The most wily of illusionists can hide the flame, though novices and incompetents often fail to fool anyone with their magic. The flickering of a false flame gives it away. Oh, this is cool. I like that one. Green flame. Pale and sickly, simultaneously the color of half-rotten olives and underripe limes. Interesting choice of fruits. Green flame roams the eyeless lands, brought by the ogres and their insipid illness from below. It is the flame of rot and disease, lit deep within the earth in the ancient city of Yersinia, long buried and left to rot and ruin. It is there that disease originates, and it is there that the sick flame burns brightest. So very cool. It's got a meaning. I could definitely come up with kind of gameable purposes for that, but I like it. Royal purple. It is a regal flame, lit with a sense of self-importance. It holds itself high. It is the queen of flames, self-appointed, of course. Some believe it's sapient. Grandiose arrogance allows fire to grow a mind. It thinks itself greater than you. It looks down at you with eyes made of drifting ash and tilts up a chin made of cinders. Brass, liquid metal, flickering like fire, a creation of the dwarves, once used by warriors who specialized in liquid metal weapons and armor. The art is mostly lost to the dwarves, stolen by the dragon cult Halavites? And then finally, black, it eats light. an orcish invention, a flame designed to scorch gods. Few things can harm an idol, and fewer still can harm divinity, but the horrid black flame of orcs can. Enough flame and enough time will result in an undead god, the most powerful and twisted weapon of the orcs. So very cool. I mean, I would definitely change these up, but it definitely gives me a lot of ideas for something. I like the idea that different flames or different colors of flames and different, and then kind of what it means. And then you can deploy it places. Like, what does it say if you go to a town? Like, imagine you're an adventurer, right? Or you're just adventuring and you enter a town and there's just bodies strewn everywhere. And at the center of town, there's a little green flame. Like, that's like, oh, but like, that's it. That's the disease. Green flame. I mean, that's really cool. And it adds to a lot of stuff. Well, who has this green flame? How do you put it out? Can you do something with it yourself? What can you do? Where does one get these different flames from? Very cool stuff. Brian Smith says, I can see this is a very cool way to get some lore into those dungeon descriptions just by mentioning the color of the braziers. And RPG Grandma says, yep, color symbolism in the game. Yes, very cool. But I like that it's also not just symbolism, but it's an actual thing, right? It is symbolic of whatever, but it is also actually a physical manifestation and emanating point of emanation. Like the idea that the disease isn't just symbolized by the green flame, it literally is emanating from the green flame. And that thus somebody planting or placing this green flame in this location has spread disease in this village. Like that, to me, is very cool. All right, can we get one more in here before I call it a stream? Let's see. We'll go back. Burn your game. Let's see. Economics and RPGs. I think this is all. It's chapter 4, so I'm not going to get. No time for that. Arena assaults. Pathfinder, no thank you. Share PS with your players. All right, still in the dungeon. Now let's go back again. Let's see. Oh, well, this might be good. The Alexandrian, adapting linear stories. How long is this? Well, I know. So I'm already at 150. Is this really long? It's a little bit long. All right, let's try it. So this is posted to the Alexandrian, thankfully not on Blogspot. It's called Adapting Linear Stories. It was posted on the 23rd of September, 2023, in case you're finding this years from now. As we all know, RPGs are not movies, and the principle of using linear mediums as RPG examples reminds us that there are fundamental differences between the books, movies, TV shows, and graphic novels we love and the fundamentally interactive medium of the role-playing game, or at least there should be. Nonetheless, who among us hasn't dreamed of playing through our favorite stories, of actually experiencing an adventure that we have seen or read? Or maybe we're just GMs with a session to prep and a desperate need to find some quick and easy inspiration. Either way, what would it mean to take a traditional linear story and adapt it to your gaming table? Adapting characters. Let's start with a relatively easy proposition of bringing your favorite characters to the gaming table. Luke Skywalker, Lara Croft, Sherlock Holmes, Sister Frevis, Oedipus, whoever has captured your imagination. I have no idea who Sister Frevis is. To start, you'll want to identify the precise version of the character you want to play. The Luke Skywalker who is a character for from different myths or continuities. Actually, upon reflection, this is also true of Luke Skywalker. On a similar note, rather than capturing an existing vision of a character, you might actually set out to create your own variation of the character. Out of all the Batgirls which have existed, you're creating your own unique Gestalt Batgirl. You can do this even with characters who currently exist in only one canonical form. In practice, this will quickly become true in any case because it's of vital importance to recognize that your character's destiny from the medium you're adapting them from does not exist. From whatever point in their personal continuity you may be drawing them, once they've been injected into the gaming table, their future is unwritten. Maybe your Luke Skywalker falls to the dark side or never becomes a Jedi at all. Maybe your Sherlock Holmes never meets Moriarty. You're playing to find out. Brian Smith says, Sister Previce must be Whoopi Goldberg's character in Sister Act. It might be a guess. I mean, your guess is as good as mine, because goodness knows I don't know. Adapting plot. Now let's swap to the Game Master's side of the table. Obviously, we don't want to prep a plot. So the first thing we'll want to do is get rid of the plot from our source material. Step 1, remove the main characters and every action they take. Step 2, what you'll be left with is a situation. Identify the best structure for modeling the situation. A node-based structure will probably work 4 times out of 5. Step 3, the original story had a hook for getting the characters involved. Rehook it for your PCs. In some cases, you'll be able to use the same hook that the film or book did, but often you'll get better results customizing the hook to your PCs. Unsurprisingly, this looks a lot like how I rebuild Railroad Adventures as described in How to Remix an Adventure. Also, you can check out that essay for some specific details of how to identify and implement various scenario structures. All right, sorry, I just need a little break here for a drink. A place where this can get tricky is that a lot of films or books will actually dedicate a large chunk of narrative to getting the group together. These sessions are usually heavily dependent on the specific characters and the specific choices those characters make, plus often a large helping of random coincidence. You can easily get lost trying to recreate those specific story beats at the table. And even if you do successfully recreate them, it usually means that some players are sitting around for an hour or more waiting for the narrative to onboard their character, which obviously isn't ideal. For example, in Star Wars, the adventuring party is Leia, R2-D2, C-3PO, Luke, Obi-Wan, Han, and Chewie. It not only takes half the movie to bring them all together, but it's all based off a chain of very specific events. The droids have to be sold to Luke, R2-D2 has to escape, they have to specifically hire the Millennium Falcon as opposed to any other ship, etc. Similarly, in Lord of the Rings, you have to get all the way to Rivendell before the final adventuring party is assembled. All of this, of course, should disappear when you strip out the main characters and the actions they take. It's just that in this specific case of bringing the party together, you might be surprised by just how much stuff hits the cutting room floor. Now we'll go back to an example from Star Wars. Let's actually zoom in on Star Wars for a moment as an example of what this might look like in actual practice. Having removed all of our main characters, what's the actual premise of the film? To get the Death Star plans to Alderaan. Okay, so what's the situation to begin the movie? So just to, because he doesn't go into detail here, just to be reminded, right? In Star Wars, the original thing that Princess Leia is trying to do is escape with the Death Star plans from Darth Vader and get them to Alderaan. She is captured, but so she's about to get captured and she knows it, so she sends off the druids in the escape pod. The escape pod lands on Tatooine or wherever, and then they go to the whole thing and they get back around. And then finally, they put the plans in action. But yes, from a standpoint of what is actually happening when you're kind of removing all this stuff is someone's got the plans to the Death Star, Bothan spies or whomever, and they're trying to transit those plans to Alderaan. And of course, the Empire's trying to stop them. Hey, Suez. Okay, now, so going back to the article. Okay, so what's the situation at the beginning of the movie? The plans have been stolen. Darth Vader is in pursuit on board a Star Destroyer. The Death Star exists and has a hidden weakness. The rebel base is on Yavin 4. There are rebel contacts on Alderaan. What about all the stuff on Tatooine? Well, its relevance kind of depends on whether or not we ever go to Tatooine in the first place, and that will likely depend on how exactly we frame the beginning of our adventure and hook the PCs into it. For example, one option would be to back the clock up and have the PCs be the ones who steal the plans in the first place. This could very easily result in them never going to Tatooine at all, since they could just as easily attempt to flee from Vader's Star Destroyer to Naboo, or Kashyyyk, or Hoth, or Cato Nemoidia, or an asteroid belt. Alternatively, maybe you launch the adventure in media res when the group's escape pod lands on Tatooine. They need to avoid the Imperial soldiers who are pursuing them, and they need to get off planet quick. If that's the case, we can add their escape pod lands in an area of Tatooine with moisture farms. We can prep an example moisture farm. Jawa transports crisscross the area. They like to steal droids. The PCs need a ship. Mos Eisley is where they can hire or steal a ship. We could perhaps prep 3 different ships that they might be able to take. And finally, there's a local crime syndicate run by the Hutts. Another option would be that the PCs actually have 2 goals: steal the Death Star plans and recruit General Obi-Wan Kenobi, a retired hero of the Clone Wars. We are now considering an NPC instead of a PC. We could even imagine the PCs perhaps deciding to recruit Obi-Wan Kenobi first. Or maybe the adventure hook is recruit Obi-Wan Kenobi, and then unexpectedly they're beamed the Death Star plans as they arrive on Tatooine. Now there's a Star Destroyer dropping out of hyperspace on top of them. Notice how all these different hooks are going to frame and shape the adventure in slightly different ways, particularly once the player's choices start interacting with them. but most of them are still going to play out across the top of the same situation-based prep. On that note, what scenario structures would we actually use to prep our tabletop Star Wars adventure? Probably several. First, if we include stealing the Death Star plans, that's almost certainly a heist. After they steal the plans, their goal is to deliver them to Alderaan. We could let them go straight to Alderaan, skip ahead to their arrival, come up with an explanation for why they have to go to another planet on their way to Alderaan. Fuel. For this, you might just show them a hyperspace network map, let them choose their course, and then have the encounter with Vader's Star Destroyer happen, followed by prepping whatever planet they end up on. Radically expand this part of the adventure by turning it into a full-fledged MacGuffin keep-away. Hey, RPG Grandma, sorry you got to go, but thanks for hanging out. The advantage of prepping this for your own table is that you don't need to prep every single planet they can conceivably go to. At the end of the heist, they have them choose their escape vector and end the session. Then prep whatever planet the Star Destroyer attack will strand them on. Or alternatively, have them choose their escape vector, trigger the Star Destroyer encounter, and then cut as their ship or escape pod crash lands on the planet. Regardless, there's now a clear prep vector. They need a ship. The ship will take them to Alderaan. They'll discover that Alderaan has been destroyed and see the Death Star, which might result in their ship being tractored in. However that plays out, they now have to go to Plan B, which is delivering the Death Star plans to the only other Rebel base that they know about, Yavin 4. The Rebel base is pretty straightforward in terms of prep, a brief overview plus some NPCs. For the Death Star itself, you'll likely want to prep what happens if the PCs end up inside the Death Star. The trench run. Alternatively, you could forego the trench run, declare the secret weakness of the Death Star requires a commando raid on the station, and collapse everything into your Death Star raid scenario. Or maybe there are two different options and the players can choose which one they want to pursue. Notice that other than the mission objective, deliver the Death Star plans to Alderaan, we're not assuming that things will play out the same way that they did in the movie. We're just putting the various pieces of the scenario into play. Rebel ops on Alderaan and Yavin 4, Death Star plans are here. This is the route or routes to Alderaan from where the Death Star plans are. The Death Star has just blown up Alderaan, and you're ready to play to find out. So I think it's a good example. I think it's what I think the important thing you want to think about if you're looking at some plot or something from a piece of media you want to adapt is all the different choices that arise once you start, or that you really want to eliminate all the linear things, but they can still be there in potential vectors. So in taking this Star Wars scenario, or maybe we should call it a New Hope scenario, you can still have it where potentially the party, the players follow the same path that they did in the movie, but there are lots of other paths they could do. And then depending on how you start the adventure and what kind of things you do, you can kind of turn it. Maybe in your game, the Death Star plans aren't the be all end all. It is more about Obi-Wan, or maybe it's about something else. Maybe someone else. So I guess there's no Jedi. I was going to say someone knows there's a Force powerful person on Tatooine, but there's really no one to do that. Maybe they need to try to get the Hutts on board. Maybe that's why you're there, right? There's all kinds of ways you can configure it, and then doing that will kind of shift the sort of events that come into play. All right, so let's see the next section here. Oh, it's just the end. Disguising your purloined adaptation. What if your players recognize the source material you're cribbing from? Well, sometimes that's the point, but if it's not, then you just need to make sure that you either pick source material the players aren't familiar with and or scrub off the serial numbers. This can be a bit harder than it looks. Changing the One Ring to a magical tiara might throw them off the scent, but the volcano named Mount Bane might tip them off. Mount Bane. One of the surest ways to hide your inspiration, though, is a complete genre shift. For example, replace Spaceship with Spelljammer, Mos Eisley with Luskin, and Death Star with Illithid Ubermind. They won't suspect a thing. Yeah, they might, but still, it'll be fun. All right, that was cool. A good article from Alexandrian. I think that's good advice. It's always fun that you always find fun stuff in the material. I always find it's better just to take bits and pieces of different things, put them together. As the Dave says, you have to escape Alderaan before it blows up. Yeah, that's a good, like you can see right that, in the movie, it seems to take them forever to power up the Death Star. So imagine you've got some period of time where the ticking clock is the Death Star has just gone out of hyperspace in orbit of the planet. And now it's like starting to, you can extend that long time it takes for the guys with the pointy helmets to pull all those levers down with having it turning slowly to position the disc, whatever the satellite disc kind of thing there, and then all the different things that tell like, oh gosh, this thing's going to do something horrible. Maybe if you're a Force sensitive person, you might even have that premonition of everything going south. So how many who can you rescue off of Alderaan? How can you get off of Alderaan? Then, of course, you have to escape the ships. You can even play around with the order. Maybe you escape from Alderaan and you realize you need to go to Tatooine. Maybe somebody tells you you don't have time to get to Yavin 4, but there's a powerful Force user named Obi-Wan Kenobi that was last seen on Tatooine, and we need his help. Right there, you could even flip some things around. Actually, that escaping Alderaan before it blows up is a good. Reminds me that if you watch season 1 of Loki, I guess there was some element of that, though I'm gonna try not to spoil it. All right, folks, I'm gonna call that a wrap. It's been a while since I did one of these community roundups, and part of it is, as you saw me even today, a little bit of a struggle to find stuff. I gotta get some more sources in. As I always say, if you out there have written something or you know something that was read that inspired you or you found really informative or interesting or even controversial in a way, gaming-wise controversial, I'm not interested in other types of controversies, shoot it over to me. Find me on social media, drop me a line, put it in the comments, put it in the chat, anywhere. And then we can riff on it and read it. And if you've written it yourself, all the better, because I would love to highlight folks like that. Not that it's that much, but I do what I can. We have survived the flooding here in New York, and I should be going to the Renaissance Festival this weekend, so I'm excited about that. Oh, and my character got killed in Daniel's game last night. Got fingered. That sounds gross. Was killed via finger of death from a high-level cleric. It looks like he's going to be able to get rezzed or something, either reincarnated or resurrected. We shall see. I didn't do anything wrong. I mean, it didn't come from any mistakes on my part, but I rolled some awful. I've been rolling terribly in that game in general. It's just I feel like me rolling 6s in that game. It's not working out well, and I had a couple opportunities to not die, and I rolled awfully. So I feel like I did the things I wanted to do that I should have done, but I just rolled terribly. And there it was, and finger death, no joke. It was actually kind of, it was kind of cool. But hopefully he might be back. Otherwise, someone new will pop along. Actually, I'm playing another hireling until we see what's going to happen with my main guy. So we'll see about that. That was fun. And then in sad news, it looks like my home game may be wrapping. We've been on hiatus since the summer, and the players have actually been very proactive in trying to get the game going again. But I only have 2 players, and one of the players just sent a message the other day saying that their schedule is just going to be not getting any easier, and he just can't see having consistent windows to play. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do about that, whether I'm just going to call it quits and figure out something else to do. I don't know. So I got some thinking to do on that front. But folks, have a great weekend, or whenever you end up watching or listening to this. Game on, everybody, and I will talk to you later. Bye now.